Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Better now.
It's now streaming on the website whenever you're ready.
Well, I don't really have any notes or anything in front of me because we don't have quorum. So I will be looking to staff since we don't have quorum tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, one moment. Sorry about that. So, Mr. Mayor, we don't have quorum today. However, the hope is that we can press ahead with the presentation, which will be available on our website, and we can certainly provide the same presentation to the committee or council at a future date when we're able to achieve quorum. However, if we press ahead today, then we will be able to communicate the results of the survey via our website.
You're muted, Rob.
Thank you, Stuart. I do see my agenda in front of me now. So the one step I will do is I will like to acknowledge that this meeting is being directed on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. I think it's important to acknowledge that. We aren't taking any notes or anything. I will still offer public participation. Do we have anybody from the public who wishes to make comments before we move on to our presentation? And I do see that Councillor Jansen has his hand up. Councillor Jansen.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Not that I'm opposed to listening to all these wonderful people, but I just wonder if a decision is to be taken by council down the road, if there's a discrepancy between the information that's been provided to us today versus whatever might happen in the future, as far as it's up to a council member to go and look at a report or something like that. I'm not sure I feel right about proceeding in that regard. I'm not sure how other council members feel.
Well, we only have one other council member, so I can look to Stuart in a second. But staff, do you want to comment on Councillor Jansen's comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Insofar as any information changing between this presentation and a future presentation that we would make to the committee or council, we would highlight any changes so that there would be hopefully no confusion as to where the project is headed relative to the information that we're bringing forward now.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's not about changes. It's about if council is being asked to take a decision and there's a discrepancy in how the information was shared between council members and whether another council member even bothered to look at information that's somewhere and they have to migrate there on their own versus hearing the presentation live. I just wonder if we open ourselves up to some form of criticism procedurally.
Yeah.
Stuart.
Oh, thanks, Dean. Put me in the middle of this. My sense is, from what I read here, there's sort of an interim report of an ongoing project. And while there may be a few questions and a few tweaks to how that direction proceeds from here on, frankly, I don't think there's anything all that earth-shattering in here that's going to, cause tidal waves of protest with council proceeding like this. I think I would hope that all the councillors who can't make this would review it online and be as informed as those of us that are here are. Yeah, perhaps I could support Councillor Jansen if it was bigger or more controversial issue, but to me, this is really just saying, here's where we're at today and here's where we're going. And I don't imagine there's going to be any radical changes in direction based on our discussions. So I'm okay to proceed, but I do recognize that that may not be the case if it was a bigger or more complex issue.
Yeah, I would suggest that what we can do is listen to the presentation today, and then if we feel that it's essential that all a council hear this before we bring it to a council table for decision, that we may need to have a second meeting so that council can hear that. But I would say let's proceed today, and we can make that decision post. So I will hand it, since there's no agenda or anything else now, and it didn't look like there was any other public participation, I'm just going to hand it back to staff to run the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, I'd like to invite our Economic Prosperity Coordinator, Rachel Bluski, to introduce our first presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the outcome of Phase 1 of the Business Retention and Expansion Project. Phase 1 of the Business Retention and Attraction Project was to undertake a survey of 100 Colwood businesses. The purpose of this survey is to increase the city's ability to provide timely and proactive support to the business community. And secondly, to empower the city with market intelligence to enable a Phase 2 and Phase 3 assessment of this project, which will identify business sectors that could best align and potentially support the businesses already in Colwood. And these would form the basis of a business investment attraction programme. The Triage-Bree telephone survey of Colwood businesses was undertaken during July and August 2021, and we would like to say thank you to the 100 members of our business community who took time to participate in this survey. We received some interesting results. Here to talk us through those results are the city's consulting team, NDB Insights, who will be presenting the outcomes of the business survey. And we have Lauren Millier, Executive Vice President of NDB Insights, Jordan Tidy, Senior Consultant, and Chris Bandak, Executive Vice President. And with that, I'd like to hand over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, everyone. And I just want to pick up on the conversation that was being had before our presentation. We're more than happy to present the balance of the results that are here to council at a future date if you feel that's appropriate. But certainly, in order to continue to move this project forward, we believe it's relevant to share with you some of the findings that we're hearing from the business community before we come back to this committee again. I'm just going to ask Jordan to launch the presentation for me. Jordan and I are working collaboratively on this project with both Ian and Rachel. I've also asked Chris Bandak, as was noted by Rachel, to participate in today's discussion as necessary. Chris heads up our market research group and comes to this work with decades worth of market sector and research experience, having worked with Forum Research as well as other organizations prior to starting our market research division within MDB. So the work that we're going to talk about today, as was indicated, is the Phase 1 as part of the Business Retention and Expansion and Attraction program that we're looking to develop for Colwood. Some of you on the call may know me, may recognize me, having done the presentation to the Prosperity Committee back in the spring, but also I was fortunate enough a number of years ago to having prepared the economic development strategy for the city of Colwood as well. So a little bit of history in the community, which I think will serve me well as we move forward through this project. If you could just advance the slide, Jordan. So because Jordan and Chris have been instrumental in the administering of the BRNE survey, I'm going to let Jordan do the majority of the presentation today because he's most familiar with the results. But what I want to do is just give you a really brief overview as to the project so you understand the context for the survey and why it was important. Jordan will talk you through the survey results themselves insofar as what we've heard. Some of it is quite interesting. Some of it will not be surprising, I suspect, given your probably fairly regular engagement with your business community. And then lastly, we'll just follow up with some key observations and remind everybody what the next steps is for this project as we move forward. Go ahead, Jordan. I'm just going to minimize my pictures here. So our work began back in the early part of July, and we have been working with Rachel and with Ian to set out a framework for undertaking this BREA strategy for the municipality. The phase one piece of work was involved preparing an inventory of the business community. This is where we build out a pretty comprehensive directory of local businesses using a variety of publicly available sources as well as information that the municipality was able to provide us. The next phase of that was the actual telephone survey of 100 businesses, and we had a pretty significant response rate from the local businesses, which I think bodes very well for the level of engagement your business community has across the municipality. And what we're obviously going to talk about today is some of the phase one reporting, some of the key findings, and how that work then informs the next phase of the work, which I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Jordan, one more. Thanks. So again, just to reiterate what Rachel had said, we've completed a business satisfaction survey for the municipality. We did this between July and August, and it was done so that we had a really good understanding of how best to support local businesses. We know that business retention and expansion activities can be employed to support business needs. They need to be monitored and addressed. We also recognize that engagement can be very time-consuming and complex, which is why when we first began to discuss our approach with Rachel and with Ian, we felt we would be able to do a much more significant survey of businesses using a telephone survey than if we were simply to rely on visitations or businesses completing online surveys. And this is particularly important as businesses begin to emerge from COVID and we begin to understand what some of the recovery efforts might mean for the municipality based on that. So the triage BRNE survey, and this is a tool that MDB Insight has developed, was commissioned to engage with the broader business community, but it also allows for the identification of potential expansion and retention opportunities that will in turn allow the municipality follow up on a business by business, client by client basis. So this in turn obviously will allow the city to focus and provide more timely and proactive support to the business community where it's most needed. And as Jordan gets into a description of some of the results, you'll get an appreciation for where some of that support is required. So the methodology, very briefly, just to explain, and if there's any questions with respect to the approach that's here, Chris is more than happy to address any of those for you. So our telephone survey was conducted using a random sample, starting with 622 businesses. And you will recall earlier I indicated that we completed an inventory, built out a pretty comprehensive business directory of local businesses with which to do the survey. In total, we did 101 interviews between August 3rd and August 13th. And the survey approach resulted in a response rate of 21.8%, which is extremely high. In the market research industry, where response rates typically are in the 1% to 2% range, which, as you can imagine, requires a much larger universe of participants in order to get something that is statistically relevant. Addresses were confirmed for each business to update the city's business directory, and this information has been provided to Colwood subsequent to this work. A scientific methodology, just for everyone's appreciation, is a methodology whereby each business in the population has had an equal probability of being selected. This ensures that the results of the final sample are very representative of the greater business population within the city of Colwood. The margin of error that's been associated with the final sample is plus or minus 9.5%, with about a 95% confidence interval, meaning that the results are repeatable 19 times out of 20. We would note that this represents a maximum margin of error, and in many cases, the margin of error would actually be quite less. Go ahead. So I'm going to turn this over to Jordan at this point, and he will walk you through some of the findings that we've received. I'm not sure, Ian, Rachel, whether you want us to take questions through the presentation or whether we could ask members of the committee and staff perhaps to hold their questions to the end, and then we can address them together, whichever would work best for you.
Hi. Happy to provide the opportunity to answer questions throughout the presentation if you're willing to pause when needed.
Absolutely.
But just as a reminder, as we don't have quorum, this isn't an official meeting, so the Q&A will not be part of the minutes that would normally be taken as part of a committee meeting.
Understood. All right, I will turn this over to Jordan then.
Thanks, Lauren. So we're just going to start with some of the business community firmographics. This really just gives us an understanding of what the business community looks like as we sort of set out our engagement. And a lot of this information is very helpful in terms of how you plan ongoing engagement from this point and the particular issues that they might be facing. It gives us a lot of indicators to potentially tell us how to best support them. So if we take a look in the community, about 87% of the businesses surveyed have 1 to 5 employees. So we're looking at a business base with a fairly small number of full-time employees. Now, that provides some opportunities because typically businesses that are in that size don't necessarily have the ability or the institutional knowledge to interact as effectively as larger communities do with larger businesses do with governments. So there's definitely opportunities there to get into some support activities that they may not necessarily be aware of. If we take a look at the number of years that businesses have been in operation within the city, we see that over half of our businesses here have been in business for more than 10 years. So they're a well-established group of small businesses for the most part. And if we also take a look at, about 44% are locally owned and operated businesses, and then 54% are self-employed. So we've got lots and lots of small business owners within the community, which creates some interesting opportunities because decision-making is more local. Typically, smaller businesses tend to be fairly resilient in the face of change. So it's a really interesting, it's a great dynamic point to be at because we've got some opportunities to really support these businesses while also maintaining that stability within the community. If we move forward, we ask whether or not businesses currently rent or own their property. So we had about 38% saying that they rent, 59% they said that they own, and 3% that don't know. So this is great information as well. So one of the reasons we asked this question is we're trying to determine how sticky are these businesses to the community, right? How likely are they to remain in the community? And so when we ask the question about whether they rent or own, businesses that own their own business location, they're more connected to the community as they're more connected to the community. So if we take a look at our renting group, out of that 38%, we asked, what the term of their lease was. So we had 34% sitting at month to month, 11% at 1 year terms, 3% at 2 to 3 year, and 26% at that 4 to 5 year term, with 13% at more than 5 years. So what we call this a flag. So we put a red flag on those businesses that are month to month, because when we do the follow up with those businesses, we really want to understand, okay, why are we going month to month? Is it because you can't find a location? Are there other opportunities to sign a longer lease? Trying to find ways to help those businesses expand and stay within the community. So that's why we ask these types of questions. And when we sort of asked, the same questions, the term of the lease, when the lease would expire, we've got 24% in less than a year and 29% in 1 to 3 years. So out of that 38, there's a lot of opportunities there, at least to have the discussion to understand where there might be a place for the community to support them. Speaking of the business community as well, we asked what their primary target market for their businesses were, and we can see that 41% of the business community is focused on the local market primarily, with 28% focused on the regional market, and then 17% going up to Vancouver Island, with only about 3% on the international side, and then 6% each for the national and provincial. So this represents another opportunity, right? So working with our local business community to sell more of their products either online or accessing other markets, it's one of those things that helps build the business community locally. And it's one of those things that we sort of track as we reach out to businesses after the standpoint. So that's why we want to collect this data, say, okay, we know that you're primarily focused with your local business community. How can we get you connected to other markets or beyond the borders of the community? The next slide is related to sectors. So you see there's a fairly broad cross section of sectors that were represented here. So, construction and professional, scientific, and technical services were about 30% of our total business community. We've got retail trade sitting at 10%, healthcare, social assistance at 8%, and then it sort of drops off from there. So 5% to accommodations and food services, arts, entertainment, recreation, and so on. So there's a fairly big mix here, but we can definitely see where there's a bit of a cluster of the business community itself within construction, professional, scientific, and technical services. And we expect that to continue, specifically on the professional, scientific, and technical services. Now with COVID, the ability to work remotely in many different communities out there, it sort of showcases that Colwood's a community of choice for those types of individuals.
Sorry, could I just interrupt and just ask
For sure.
a question about that? Sorry, was that who answered the survey, or is that what we actually believe our community is?
That was who answered the survey.
So do you believe that this is representative of our business community for Colwood? Like, is
Yes.
this like so for example, using the first two, construction and professional, scientific, and technical services, if I just did a survey more broadly, we believe that construction represents 15% of our business, and same with professional, scientific, and technical services. This isn't just who answered the survey.
Well, this is based on who answered the survey, but because we have the sample size that we were able to connect, we feel that this is representative of the overall business community. Now, in the work that we had done leading up to this, as Lauren had alluded to earlier, we have the development of the inventories. So we pulled data from a number of different areas to sort of support the development of this directory to begin with. So we use data from Stats Canada to pull the individual census subdivision businesses by NAICS code. So we can see exactly which businesses are registered through CRA with Stats Canada in your particular zone. So in terms of the amount, the hard data, there might be some variations between this, but we do feel that this is a fairly representative sample of what your business community looks like right now.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll just add to that, Mr. Mayor, a little bit. And so to be more precise, it should be representative of the total business community, taking into account the margin of error. So obviously there can be some small changes in either direction, but overall, this should be quite representative of what your overall business community looks like.
Awesome, thank you.
And then on the next slide, we asked about their relationship with the city. So whether or not the individuals at the businesses knew who they could speak to at the city if they had a concern. We pretty good numbers here. We've got over half of your business community somewhat or strongly agreed that they knew who to reach out to at the city. So this is great in terms of, it's a great indicator in terms of the business community's relationship with the city, and it's a great indicator of where we can take this going forward. If there's that high level of connectivity, we can use that to sort of build on and continue to work with the business community towards expanding their businesses. So the next section, that section was all about firmographics. This section is about business performance. So we really got into how the businesses themselves are doing. So in this situation, we asked, over the past 12 months, would you say your attitude about doing the business in the city is more positive, the same and not changed, and more negative? And we can see that we've got more businesses are indicating that they feel more positive about the future than they feel negative. So 23% versus 11%. And if we take a look at the revenue, so compared to last fiscal year, have revenues in your business this fiscal increased? So we had 37% indicating that they'd increase and 34% that they'd remain the same. So a decent majority of your businesses are doing fairly well in the last fiscal year. with only about 25% indicating their revenues had decreased. But when we look ahead at the businesses' feelings for the future, they feel, over half your businesses feel that they're going to see higher revenues into the future, and 36% the same. So this is a fairly good indication that your business community is feeling fairly positive about the future for the most part. So we have a business performance forecast tool that we've developed over the years through our work throughout Canada using our Triage BRE tool. So we've been able to take a look at businesses, communities across Canada and their business communities, and sort of indicate based off of their changes in revenue and get an idea of, their changes in revenue and their attitudes about doing business. We get an overall directional picture for the business climate in the city. So you're sitting at about 0.24% in terms of expansion. This is great numbers here. And later on in the work, we actually have an indicator of where you're sitting against all of the communities in our index.
I'll add a little bit to this, Jordan, if you don't mind. So basically, this takes the metrics from the business performance and puts it into a forecast. And so basically, if attitudinally people have a positive attitude, if quantitatively they're expecting revenues to increase, then you're going to be towards the expansion side of the forecast. If, for instance, attitudinally it was somewhat neutral, if revenues weren't expected to increase, and you had those kinds of numbers, you might be more in a contraction state. So this is a very positive metric. It shows that your business community is sort of recovering, bouncing back, and either way, the forecast for the future looks positive, and there seems to be growth coming with a good attitudinal positive attitude towards the future as well. Go ahead, Jordan. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Moving on to the next one is around supply chain. Now, the reason we asked this question is because, the next phase of this project is focused on that FDI attraction, the next few phases, or expansion within the business community itself. So understanding where there might be some opportunities within the supply chain is a great way to sort of identify where some growth might be possible to increase the overall business activity. So if we take a look at the issues that your local business community is running into when it comes to accessing your supply chain. So, in terms of, the number one issue is the number of available local suppliers. It was mentioned 23 times, which sort of indicates that there are some gaps locally that maybe potentially could be filled by either new businesses or other businesses expanding into Colwood. So it gives us the opportunity to sort of see where that opportunity might be and find some areas to help expand. The other next highest issue is the price of available local suppliers. So that's one of those issues that may hinder the expansion of local businesses purchasing from one another. But it's one of those indicators that we want to continue to follow up with, as well as the quality of local suppliers, accessibility of imports, availability of imports, volatility of import suppliers, volatility of local suppliers, and the price of imports being mentioned the least number of times. So definitely we feel that there's some indicators here that can help us into the next two phases of the project and sort of identify where some of those gaps may exist and how to sort of see if we can fill them with businesses that are in the community. So the next section is about COVID-19 impact, recovery, and resiliency.
Sorry, Jordan, I think Lauren was going to say something, but she was on mute.
Sorry, Lauren, do you want me to go back?
Just one of the things that I wanted everyone to appreciate as you look at this slide, as we come out of the core of the impact of COVID, we expect to see challenges associated with local supply chains and the pricing associated with local supply chains as well. So these are one of those issues in a municipality that you would want to monitor on an ongoing basis, and not just to make core assumptions now that you don't test in through your later work. So this would come out through regular engagement with your business community as to whether or not they felt they had an adequate supply chain for their local business. Go ahead, Jordan.
Thanks. So diving into the COVID impact, recovery, and resiliency section, So we asked over the past 12 months, how has the COVID-19 global pandemic impacted your business? 27% indicated it was more positive, 31 indicated the same and has not changed, and 43% were more negative, which is not, not all that surprising that there was a negative response. Although it is fairly heartening to see that, just over half of your businesses were not necessarily overly negatively impacted over the past 12 months. When asked whether or not businesses laid off staff, we had only 16% indicated that they had. And then when asked again, have they rehired staff? We had 18% saying that they rehired staff. So I think there's some positive interactions here showing that your business community, based on the industries that they work in, the way that they're currently configured, they're fairly resilient to things like this, things like the COVID pandemic. Moving next into satisfaction levels. So overall, we asked how satisfied are businesses with the city of Colwood as a place to own and operate a business. And we had a satisfaction rate of 92%. So that's 54% very satisfied, 39% somewhat satisfied, which is a very high number. It's a great indicator to see that the business community, connected, of course, to the previous slides where we talked about they're knowing where to go to at the city if they need support. They're feeling positive about the community, and they know who to reach out to at the city. So together, these are really great indicators that there's a good relationship between the municipality and the business community, and that the business framework is conducive towards businesses. If we sorry.
Yeah, go back for a second. I just want to make a couple of points here as well. 90, as Jordan mentioned, 92% is actually quite high. So we've done in the area of 70 to 80 of these over the past few years, and it's really hard to get into the 90s. So 92% is excellent, and this is a great metric. Even as this project progresses, into attraction, this is a great metric to use when attracting businesses. The fact that you can demonstrate that the local business community is so satisfied doing business. The second thing that strikes me relative to a lot of the other projects we ever do is the percentage of very satisfied. Typically, somewhat satisfied tends to be higher than very satisfied. So not only do you have a high top two box, but the very satisfied are also significantly higher than the somewhat satisfied. So I think this is something to be proud of. This is an excellent metric. And, obviously the goal is for continuous improvement and to move the needle forward, but you're at a very, very good starting point. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks. Sorry for interrupting, Jordan.
Sure. So then jumping into satisfaction levels related to individual factors of doing business. So this list, it's a little bit busy, but essentially what we've done is we've asked businesses the same question we asked on the previous, was that how satisfied are you with these factors of doing business? So for example, at the very top, you can see the relationship with local government for business needs. You're sitting at a satisfaction rate of 91%, which again, it ties very well to the previous slide where we're showing 92% of overall satisfied. So we can see that the business community is feeling pretty good about that particular factor of doing business. And we take a look on the reverse side at the bottom, we have the availability of adequate affordable housing sitting at 39%. So I'm sure no one who lives in Colwood will find that as a surprise. The fact that just in BC in general, housing prices having increased so dramatically over the past decade. The next issue on the list here is the availability of skilled labor and the availability of affordable space in local industrial parks, both sitting at 44%. So we can see there's some interconnected issues here. There's issues related to housing, there's issues related to finding workforce, and there's issues related to sourcing space for businesses. And then the next one, of course, is on availability of unskilled labor, also sitting at 45%. So the factors that are facing the business community are very much related to labor and space, because you can see the next two, availability of commercial space to rent or lease, or the availability of property to purchase or lease, both sitting at 48 and 46% respectively. So basically all of the issues that over half of your business community is, or there's a under 50% satisfaction rate, they tend to be related related to land and labor. Those tend to be those two issues. So this is really great information for us to have, because as your business retention expansion team gets out there and has those conversations with businesses, they'll go into those conversations understanding that these are issues that they're having right now, and they can come pre-armed with solutions or different programming or activities that the city has access to or can connect them to. So then the next stage, what we do with the overall satisfaction level is, and maybe I'll pass this one over to Chris, since he designed the derived importance and priority matrix.
Yeah, sounds good, Jordan. Thanks. So what we do is we use the KPI as a means of understanding how important each of the factors are of doing business. So we want to get a good understanding of how those factors rank in importance relative to the KPI. And the goal is to understand where we can make improvements in those business factors, or what we should focus on that is going to have the largest impact on the KPI. And so the best way to sort of explain the statistics behind it is this little animation that you see. And in this example, and this is not real data, this is just for demonstration purposes, but in this example, you'll see two factors of doing business and you'll see a KPI. And if you look at the first one, development and building permit process, you'll see as that KPI increases and decreases, it has a very large impact on the KPI, or it would have a very high derived importance. Conversely, if we look at cell phone service, as its satisfaction increases and decreases, you can see it has a small impact on the KPI. And so what we do is we take this data and we create a priority matrix. And the priority matrix really helps us understand what the top priorities are. And something is deemed to be a top priority for two reasons. One, it has to be important or have a high derived importance. And two, there has to be room for improvement. So it has to be something that you're not doing that well. And those two factors together make something a high priority. The reason it's a high priority, other than quantitatively what I just described, it's important because if you can make improvements, and you should be able to make improvements because the satisfaction levels tend to be a lot lower, you know that it's important and you know that it's going to have an impact on the overall KPI. Therefore, focusing on those specific priorities are going to lead to a strong improvement on the KPI in the future. Now, your KPI is already pretty high, but it doesn't mean that you can't make improvements and that you can't focus on the things that are going to be the most meaningful to the business community.
So then going into the actual matrix as developed from the data gathered from the survey, we can see that availability of health and medical services ended up at the top of the list in terms of overall priority. So it had a rank of importance at 6.5 and a performance rate of 54%. So as Chris mentioned previously, part of the reason why it goes to the top of the list is because there is room for improvement. So there's definitely some opportunities there, with the next being the availability of unskilled labor, adequate affordable housing, commercial space to rent or lease, skilled labor, availability of property to purchase or lease, and the availability of space in local industrial parks. So with the one exception of medical services, every one of the issues that sort of came to the top of that list are both related to land or buildings and the access to labor. So we can see that's a fairly strong theme in terms of the issues that are impacting the business community within Colwood. We take a look at the business community health. This is what I had sort of alluded to previously, was the health index that we've created through all of the different BRE surveys that we've completed. So essentially, we've used this survey to combine a number of these questions into an index, which indicates, how your business community is faring against the following 8 subsectors. So overall satisfaction, future plans, revenue outlook, change in revenue, change in attitudes, business policy supports, incentives, workforce attraction, retention, and infrastructure and amenities. So we can see that your community is, the local average here is 761 versus the national 5-year average at 743. So we can see that your community has scored above that 5-year advantage, and basically you've outperformed on overall satisfaction and overall outlook in terms of attitudes about doing business in the city and revenue expectations. So it's very strong given the negative COVID impact that's happened across other communities throughout the index. So we take a look at this, and this is just a sort of a value add from the data we've been able to gather through all of our different work, just to sort of see how you're stacking up. And I think it's probably not all that surprising that you're sitting a little bit ahead, because if you take a look at your results so far with that high satisfaction with the community and a number of not too many areas within affecting business satisfaction being sort of under that 50% threshold, you're doing well in a lot of different areas. Sorry, Chris, I'm sure you'll want to add something to this.
Yeah, no, that was good, Jordan. But yeah, so the metric itself basically is a combination of all of the scores from the survey, as Jordan alluded on the previous slide. So it's going to take into account your business performance. It's going to take into account your KPI, your factors of doing business. And what we do is we take all the results from all of those questions and we create an index for Colwood. In addition, we have an average national index from all of the studies that we do across Canada. And so that gives you a quick snapshot of how you're doing against the rest of the country. And as Jordan already spoke to, obviously you can tell you're doing a little bit better. But the other thing I like about this is the horizontal blue bars, which represent all the businesses that participated in the survey. And again, it's just another tool in the triage product to help you sort of identify those businesses that are excelling or doing extremely well on the index versus those that might be struggling. So in addition to sort of flags, this provides another set of data that can be used by the team to determine who might need immediate assistance, who might need help. So it's got lots of value rolled into sort of one big quantitative index. Thanks, Jordan.
So then, as I mentioned previously, we have flags that we've identified throughout the survey. So in this particular section, we'd asked a number of questions. So we asked whether or not businesses were planning to expand. And in this situation, we had 29 businesses respond that they were planning to expand, 10 within the next 6 months and 19 in more than 6 months from now. Now, those are our green flag companies. But then we get into our red flag companies. So those are companies that are downsizing, relocating, selling, or closing. So we can see there are 5 that are planning to downsize, 2 within the next 6 months, 3 in more than 6 months from now, 3 planning to relocating, so 2 within the next 6 months and 1 in more than 6 months from now. 1 is looking at selling in more than 6 months from now, and 2 are in more than 6 months from now, looking to close. So the idea being here that we've identified these specific businesses as those that are, they have an opportunity for intervention. We can support those businesses. So we sort of see how we have got our opportunity businesses and our threats in terms of our red and green flag. And that also, the threat column also includes those businesses that their lease is expiring within a short amount of time. So basically, we've identified between these two lists a number of businesses that we feel should be prioritized for outreach, both to help them in their expansion and then on the red flag side to mitigate the issues that they're facing in terms of hopefully retain them within the community. In many situations, this can be as simple as having a conversation around succession and finding the right connection within the business community to support them. So this is a really important, these are really important data to take and move on to that next step through business engagement. And then, pardon me, I just have a one slide recap sort of everything we sort of spoke to at this point. So what we feel are sort of the highlights of the presentation so far. So one of the things that we, had mentioned previously, satisfaction with the business community is strong at 92%, that most of our businesses are in professional, scientific, and technical services, construction, healthcare, healthcare and social services sectors. 29 businesses are considering expansion, 17 are considering selling, relocating, downsizing, or closing. 23% of businesses indicated their level of satisfaction was more positive than 12 months ago. So we're definitely seeing, we're seeing 66% of responding to their satisfaction remained the same despite the COVID pandemic. So these are really strong numbers. That most businesses surveyed, they've been in business for more than 10 years. They have 5 or fewer employees, own their own properties, and are focused on the local and regional markets. And they also feel that they have a pretty good understanding of who to reach out to at the city if they have an issue. We only had 6 factors related to overall satisfaction that has a satisfaction level of less than 50%, which is a fairly good rate. And the factors with the highest level of satisfaction were, again, the relationship with the local business community, local government for business needs, the availability of internet service to support current and future business needs, and the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And these are fairly important, not to mention that, internet connectivity, for that satisfaction rate to be so high, it's a huge factor. It's a very important thing that's across the country. We're seeing most communities are having issues with internet connectivity. So to have great internet connectivity within your community is a huge step up against competition. When considering which factors are statistically most likely to lead to improved business satisfaction, the top priorities were that availability of health and medical services, the availability of unskilled labor, the availability of adequate affordable housing, the availability of commercial space for rent for lease, and the availability of skilled labor. So we can see that land and buildings, labor, and availability of healthcare services, those tend to be those issues that are going to impact the business community the most if we're able to move the needle on those areas. So addressing those top factors through review, adaptation, or sustained attention are the most likely to lead to higher overall satisfaction. And maybe I'll just pause right there and just see if anyone has any questions before we move on to our next steps slide. See, Councillor Parkinson has his hand up. Please, sir.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering about the size of businesses and the analysis. When we look at so many of the businesses in this sample being in the 1 to 5 person range, like we had somebody the other day who was a massage therapist and wanted to set up a home-based business. So there were kind of some issues with that, but nothing really major. They're probably never going to expand to, needing a new industrial park. I'm just wondering if the focus shouldn't be different on the businesses that are of a certain size and essentially have the potential to grow and employ a lot of people in town, versus the ones, a registered massage therapist is likely never going to, need a new office building, or, the smaller, the 1 to 5 people are probably primarily home-based businesses, maybe some with small offices here and there. But I just wondered whether it would have made more sense to focus on the larger employers and their potential to expand and hire more people than just take to consider them all equally. Do you ever split them along those lines?
Yes, actually, depending upon how you approach it, we've done different priority levels. So, for example, we'll have the entire universe of businesses out there. And in this case, for this particular project, we had a priority 1 and a priority 2 list. So in our priority 1 list, we identified specific subsectors that, to your point, have more of the ability to expand. So that first list didn't include, to your point, more of those home-based businesses or particularly restaurants or retail, like those types of businesses. We tended to focus on more of those businesses that had, to your point, that higher level of potential, those larger employers in that first list. But then, of course, we just, in terms of the overall sample, we just got them to be called first, as opposed to being interspersed with the other group to try to get that group. So to your point, yes, we do also see the potential, particularly when we're talking about the phases 2 and 3, the ability to attract additional investment to the communities being fairly important. And so wanting to hear from businesses that are most likely to be able to do that. So we definitely did prioritize those businesses first over the second group, but in order to maintain the overall universe sample, we had the entire list was reached out to. So we wanted to make sure that, to your point here, we did go that track.
So yeah, it would seem to me it's probably different requirements. I mean, if we're making sure that the small 1 to 5 person business has the ability to operate out of their home, or maybe has some small office space here and there, that's a set of requirements. Whereas if we got a construction firm with 20 people who's looking to expand to 40 or 60, they are interested in, is there available industrial land and stuff like that. So it would seem to me there's a split in what the key factors are that it sounds like you guys understand and will address.
If I may, through the chair, I think it's important to recognize, and you're getting a snapshot here, obviously, of the survey work, but in the context of what our final deliverable will look like, we're going to characterize the business community in Colwood, and I think it's fairly well understood at this point that we have a small business community, and we have a business community made up of in large part, overwhelmingly businesses with only a few number of employees. And I don't think that there's any reason to shy away from the fact that we could have businesses with 3, 5, 10 employees that have the potential to grow. I think it will depend on what sectors of the economy that they're in. And if you reflect back on the one slide that showed you what the representative sample looked like, you'll see that one sector of the economy, professional, scientific, and technical services, represents a pretty significant opportunity for the municipality, not just to grow the sectors or to grow the businesses that you've got, but also to attract more businesses of that type. So while some sectors will need industrial land, we have some manufacturers that have participated, construction companies that have participated. We also have a pretty significant number of firms in professional, scientific, and technical services that are sharing their observations on the performance of the economy as well. And they are saying similar things. Well, it may not be industrial land, it will be the availability of commercial space or office space to lease. And we know that is a challenge in Colwood, given the current inventory of available land and or buildings. So I do think at the end of the day that we've, the responses that we're getting are fairly consistent. And as we start to break down the results along some of the expectations by sector, I think we'll be able to refine some of these requirements a little bit further for you.
Thank you.
Do you want to go to the last slide, Jordan? Because it's Councillor Parkinson has segued quite nicely into where our next steps are going to take us anyway. So I wanted to sort of end Jordan's presentation with a big but. And I think, to the questions that we're receiving, we do need to recognize the fact that we have a small market. We have a very local market in terms of the nature of how businesses operate. And we have a small business community, but I think the challenge for us and the challenge for the municipality in putting together a business retention, expansion, and attraction strategy is to understand where we can expand, what sectors of the economy we can support, how we might help businesses that we've already got locally, and I would suggest somewhat regionally, how we can help them scale and either move into Colwood or remain in Colwood. Being able to answer those questions, I think, is particularly important. And as we look at where some of the key sectors of opportunity, both business and industrial, might take us, I think it's important to understand what type of infrastructure or programming we might need to put in place in order to support that. So the phase 2 of the work will actually do that deeper dive into the sectors and subsectors, get a better understanding of how those business and industry sectors are performing in Colwood, give you an appreciation through a SOAR analysis, which is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, risks, and results, give you a better sense of where some of those more targeted opportunities or limitations might be in the attraction of those business and industry sectors. All of that will get rolled together into a phase 2 report and presentation that will go into considerable detail at that point around where we see some of these opportunities for investment attraction, recognizing that some of it will be growing a domestic market, some of it will be trying to build on existing supply chains, either across the island or onto the mainland, but also looking at where some larger opportunities might exist at a foreign direct investment level. And again, this is building on activity that we may see in the Victoria and the broader regional economy, particularly when we start to talk about technology-based employment, which doesn't have the same types of limitations on location and supply chains that we see in other sectors. So that is the type of information we would expect to put in front of the committee when we come back to at the end of phase 2. So I'm just going to pause it there If there's any questions at this point from members of the committee, council, and staff, more than happy to onboard them now. It's a lot of information.
So I'm not seeing any other hands from council. I think Dean and Stuart are good. I had my questions answered throughout the presentation. I thought the presentation was excellent, by the way. Thank you. To be honest, I was screenshotting a lot of the slides that were coming through because I think they're really informative and something that's important for the public to hear as well. So I know this is a public meeting, but I think getting some of this out on social media too would be quite impactful for people. Is this slide package going to be available to council?
I'll let Ian and/or Rachel respond to that.
Yes, it is. It's currently part of the agenda package that was publicly released for this meeting and will be forwarded on to council.
Okay, excellent. Stuart or Dean, you guys have anything else before we wrap up? No, I'm not seeing anything. I will go back to Rachel and Ian then. Is there anything else needed from a staff standpoint?
No, I just want to say thanks a lot for those of you that are able to attend, and certainly we will be making this information available to the members of the community who weren't able to attend, and happy to reconvene a similar presentation if need be. Yeah,
I actually believe, I think this was informative enough that I would very much appreciate the rest of council being on the same page as the three of us. I think it's critical that happens. So I will also touch base with councillors to see if they would wish to just watch it off the video and get the information that way, or if they actually have questions, and we'll do another dynamic meeting. So I'll follow up with you, Ian, on what we need to do that way. But otherwise, I would just like to say thank you. I really do appreciate the work. The work is excellent. It's information we need to have as a city to be successful moving forward. So very much appreciate the work today. It was actually quite interesting, and I found it quite helpful. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're not in a meeting, so I'm not going to formally do anything. So we just sort of wave goodbye.
We're just going to wave goodbye. Okay. All right.